5. Sorry for that awkward silence, but if you have song suggestions for next time, please drop them because sometimes we don't even know what to play. As you may know, this is a collaboration between the Dream Center and the MCC. So I'll start by introducing myself. Oh, I already see suggestions. Awesome, thank you. My name is Sandra Gutierrez. My pronouns are she, hers. I am a second year business major and I'm the student lead for the Dream Center. Then Nat.
And then, hi everyone, my name is Natalie Zamora. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I am a second year public health major with a minor in child development, and I am a student intern, gave myself a promotion, a student intern for the MCC. And then just quickly before we start, I did want to define two terms that I think are relevant to the discussion that we're going to have today. So the first one is food insecurity, which is defined as the limited availability to nutritious and or fresh foods due to factors like finances or the environment, and as well as nutrition access, which is the ability to get healthy and safe foods. And I just wanted to define those just to clarify kind of what our discussion is going to be centered around. And so with that, I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. So please say your name, your pronouns, the job or the work you do, and why you think that work is important.
Hi, everybody. My name is Dr. Danielle Robbins. I use pronouns she, her, hers. I'm serving as the interim basic needs coordinator here at Cal Poly, and I'm actually on leave from my position in counseling services where I'm a therapist. So one of the reasons why I feel the work is important is because I'm on leave from a position that is also necessary, hoping to fulfill a role that is definitely needed on this campus. It's something that majority of other campuses do have. And hopefully this will exist in a more permanent way in the future. So, hello.
My name is Rowan. I am a community member and organizer with People's Revolutionary Garden Network. We're a group that helps like build gardens and provide food security and grows food for like our sister organization called Pantry, and Pantry distributes food down in Santa Maria. So our goal is like to help empower people to grow their own food, but also to provide actual food to distribute, and then also like give education. And then in my own like personal job, I work in school gardens and work closely with kids that don't have a lot of food access. And my pronouns are she, her. I don't know if I said that.
Hi, everyone. My name is Oscar. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am the AmeriCorps member for Campus Health and Wellbeing, so I work closely at the food pantry. One of the reasons I think why this work is so important to me is because I think there's so much of a need there, and there's a lot, I think it's not just me that's helping, but so many local businesses, nonprofits, student volunteers that are addressing food insecurity and helping their peers and and helping create access to more of a sustainable food pantry.
Hi, I'm Fiona. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a coordinator with the CalFresh outreach team. I am also on an SRI. I'm a graduate assistant studying food ecology and the history of food policy. I think this work is very important. Well, I first started on the CalFresh outreach team after I found out that I was eligible for CalFresh, and then basically grew into my role and under the understanding that everyone deserves nutritious and exciting food in their life. And yeah, happy to be here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Perez. I use she, her pronouns. I am a CalFresh outreach coordinator, and I'm also an SRI research fellow for Mi Gente Nuestra Salud, which is a health empowerment movement in Santa Maria. And why I'll focus mostly on why I did CalFresh. Similar to Fiona, I realized that I was eligible and realized how much of a resource this was, not only for me, but for many of my peers. and really wanted to advocate on their behalf and promote access to food.
Okay, awesome. Thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. I'm hoping, Nat and I are hoping that after today's panel, everyone is able to learn more about nutrition, food access, the disparities that BIPOC and marginalized students experience, and resources available to you on campus and within SLO. Just before we get started with the questions, I did want to say that we have a couple questions not everyone has to answer. Feel free to speak up if you want to, but no pressure otherwise. So I think we're ready to get started then. The first question is, in what ways has food access been addressed but not nutrition? How has nutrition been addressed but not food access? And why is the overlap so important? And we'll paste the questions in the chat right now.
One thing that I think of like right off the bat from that question is kind of like the way that we teach in schools about nutrition and about like the necessity to have all of these different food groups. But then when it's like displayed in like the lunch line of access to those like core values of like nutrition and what we should be eating often like aren't displayed in like what they are being given and what is like accessible. And then I think like another way and then like of food access being addressed but not nutrition is like a lot of times the food that is being given that is like mass produced and is like very low in nutrients and really isn't like there's not a good way to kind of mass produce like fruits and vegetables, or it's a little bit more difficult with like storage and just with like coordination and like with everything. So I think that that's like a big problem with the food access nutrition like interconnectedness. But I think that the overlap is really, really important because the people that are usually denied access to healthy foods, like that affects their entire, that they also have less access to like health services, and it's more important that they are given like the things that they need to have like a longer healthy life from food access.
Yeah, just to build off Rowan's point a little bit, Maritza and I were talking about this, and we also talked about how a lot of the programs that folks can access, like supplemental resource programs like the food pantry and food distributions, are often built off of external funding or donations. And so they don't always have the variability, freshness, or cultural relevance that promotes healthy, nutritious food options to folks. And then besides that, in food access, we often say that we're working in silos. And so like, as we're kind of triaging in a reactive way, food insecurity, we're not often able to partner nutrition along with food access in the right way. Or like Oscar was also talking about this, how there are so many people working at this issue, but the collaboration and the integration is not always like at the forefront, and that's often because of funding and like the way that we get there, I guess.
And kind of to build off that point and Rowan's point, often nutrition and food access are often a symptom of a greater thing, which is usually like lack of economic access of different and often with that comes lack of health resources, and it's all connected in a way. And a lot of resources, and Fiona and I were talking about this, tend to only focus on one point, like food access or lack to healthy access, or like Planned Parenthood, things of the such, like nonprofits. And it's often difficult to have that integrated resources for folks who often act like lack of multiple resources, which is important and critical in providing holistic well-being and wellness and nutrition.
And I think with those points, oh, Oscar, please.
Thank you, Danielle. Yeah, and one of the I think one of the words that definitely came to mind was the word food deserts. Is that here on the Central Coast, like we're so rich in agriculture, but we also don't realize the food deserts that do exist here on the Central Coast, and how sometimes to be able to get access to nutritious food, transportation is also an issue as well. Being able to get to a grocery store that sells more of fresh produce, that's often not attainable for low income and communities of color. So, and also thinking about how the long term effects and the repercussions of it has on an individual that lives in a food desert community. And when I just mean the word food desert, I mean a a community that's mostly filled with a lot of fast food restaurants and a lack of access to freshly and enriched nutrition ingredients.
And sort of taking it one step further, sort of building on everything that has already been said. Oscar and I have talked about this, I think, on a number of occasions. And, you know, one of the things that comes up often is that things that are most nutritious, healthiest, are sometimes the things that are most costly. And if somebody has lower income or they don't have the excess in money to spend on nutritious items, the option is then to have things that are more shelf stable or less healthy options. And the end result is certainly a diet filled with a lot of things that are packaged or less nutritious, comes with all sorts of things, anywhere from, you know, heart disease later on in life, and I can go through the slew of other medical ailments that can come from that. But the lack of access to nutritious options can lead or can be a detriment later in the future. So
Yep. Thank you everyone for sharing. As a public health major, like everything that you guys are saying, I'm like, yes, this is what I'm learning in classes, like the long-term effects, and then also realizing that one thing can be connected to another. So like hearing about food deserts or funding, like that all isn't connected with each other, and funding is so important. So I'm glad to bring awareness to this topic right now. And then going on to our next question, how have the programs or resources you have been a part of aided BIPOC and marginalized communities get access to nutritious, healthy food? And what gaps did the work reveal, or how can these gaps be addressed?
I can start us off. So for specifically for CalFresh Outreach Team, we tend to partner with organizations that potentially have eligible folks, things like targeted outreach with EOP, TRIO, military connectedness, etc. With CalFresh specifically, we're able to provide individuals with about $234 per month for groceries that they can use at grocery stores, farmers markets, kind of helping them gain that access to that healthy and nutritious food. And our team works very closely with students to understand how they need to be eligible, just to ensure that they understand the guidelines, understand the process, and so they don't miss out on important financial resources such as CalFresh.
And then in our work, we've also noticed quite a few gaps because since it is a federal resource, for students to be eligible, there has often been work requirements that they'd have to fulfill. There's also like undocumented folks are unfortunately not eligible. And there are these certain, like besides income, there are certain hoops that we often say like students have to jump through, like just by what type of grant they're receiving can be the difference between if they can get CalFresh or not. And so, but during COVID, we have seen a difference. There's been policy changes. And so now more folks are eligible because, for example, like previously you had to be, for the work study requirement, you had to be receiving work study currently, but now if you are eligible for work study, you can use that to get CalFresh, other stuff like that. But the reason why we keep up to date with these changes and advocate for students on their behalf is through our close connection to the Department of Social Services as well.
Yeah, and just to add on, we definitely come across some students who don't qualify for CalFresh. mostly our undocumented and international students, because it is a federally funded program. And one of the things that we have actually done to provide a more of a nutritionist-based service is, before I got to the food pantry, there wasn't like a consistent donor that would donate fresh produce to the food pantry. And it wasn't until a student asked me, like, when is the next available shipment for fresh produce? And it really didn't, like, I really had to sit with that, because I didn't really know how to answer that, and just felt bad not being able to have an answer for that. And going back home, I remember talking to my dad and my family. I come from a farm working community, and just talking about that's not a service that they provide. So many of my family members were willing to jump in. It's like, oh yeah, we can provide fresh produce. And yeah, just to see, just to fill in that gap, that's something that just it's actually helped our students a lot too. Because fresh produce is definitely expensive in the local grocery stores, but to have that service provided for free, it definitely makes a difference to our students.
Yeah, just kind of going off of Oscar, another question that popped in my mind. A lot of these programs that are offered on campus, and just like even outside of Cal Poly, programs like WIC that are offered to other communities, they're usually government funded programs, and undocumented students can't access them. Are there any solutions you all see? What can change? What steps can be taken so that undocumented communities can access all of those programs?
So the distribution that we do down in Santa Maria, it's in a parking lot, and the different cars come up to the table that we have, and we give fresh groceries, and we partner with like the food bank and with different businesses, and then with People's Garden to grow a lot of the produce that we're able to give into the bags. And one of the things that was like addressed early on with that project is making sure that we don't ask for people's information when they're coming, because at first we were thinking about like getting people's information to send out kind of like a newsletter or send out resources, but we figured that it would actually be like probably more detrimental to like be trying to like reach out to these people, and maybe being able to like give resources another way through like printed paper and just like handing out pamphlets instead of like having to take down information, even if we're like coming from a good place, just to make people feel really secure and being able to come and get food in that way. So that was like one thing that we addressed with that. And then another thing that I was just thinking about with gaps kind of in People's Garden Network that we've experienced like with this project was that it's like really difficult to grow culturally sensitive foods during the winter in San Luis Obispo. And so we were like talking to a lot of the people that were coming to our distributions, and kind of like they didn't really know what to do with like kale and like things like that, or like know how to like use these and incorporate them into their diet. And it was hard because it's like, do we just want to not give those foods away? But then we had some feedback that no, we just need like to provide more education. So we're working on that, like providing like tags in Spanish and English, just kind of like about how to cook these vegetables, just like some background and like how to incorporate them into the diet. So that's definitely like a gap that needed to be addressed within our org.
Just really quickly, I wanted to add, because Rowan's organization that she works for works with is a really good example of, while we're advocating for larger policy changes, like to get undocumented folks able to actually access WIC and CalFresh, would be to basically work with our communities and do things like mutual aid, like they're already doing. But on a policy level change scale, we've recently seen like public charge be like CalFresh not go into public charge anymore. And so that's something that folks don't have to worry about in the same way that they did a few years ago. And another thing I wanted to mention, like for families with mixed statuses, they still can access CalFresh as a resource. And so, yeah, just basically bridging the gap also from like micro communal care with macro policy change and organizing on a larger scale.
Yeah, and I just want to mention too that when the first round and second round of stimulus check came out at the federal level, undocumented families didn't qualify for those. So definitely that wasn't just a loss on the undocumented families, but that was a loss in our communities because so much of that funding could have gone to our local communities. And seeing that a lot of the food bank distributions sites, that was like the first thing that a lot of undocumented families went to. Um, and from a policy perspective, it's definitely important to advocate for more of an entrepreneurship basis for undocumented families to have access to work. Many have gone into going into street vending, and there's been a lot of punitive policies that punish a lot of our street vendors as well. And from a local perspective, it's important to advocate for these needs that we also need street vendors. Street vendors contribute to our community, and they're also important to our community as well. So definitely highlighting that need as well.
Well, thank you so much to everyone that answered. If anyone has anything else to share, please feel free to. But otherwise, we're going to move into the next question. Nat, do you want to?
I actually had a quick question before we moved on to our last question. Just wondering, because like I'm kind of new to like nutrition and like the food access realm and like understanding that. So how would you recommend someone to like learn more about this? And then also like you guys were saying, or you all were saying, like locally, like organizing and fighting for policy changes. How would you recommend someone going about that?
I can start. For me personally, just learning more about like food systems and health inequity and just the interconnectedness of it all. Really mostly through classes. There's a few public health classes that have definitely taught that, but definitely like there are definitely videos on YouTube that like are very helpful and like I've researched on my own. But it's just kind of been pieced together through the different organizations that I'm involved with. It's just kind of all provided that really strong foundation. But yeah, that's at least on my part, that's mostly been where I've got most of my knowledge.
And to speak on from a faculty perspective is I'm always learning from students. So I'm always asking that question to students who visit the food pantries. Hey, what would you like to see at our food pantry? Like, what are some suggestions or recommendations? So definitely asking faculty to like seek feedback from students. I think some of the best feedback I received were from our students who said, "Oh, I would love to see more fruits, more vegetables, these type of produce." And it's like, oh, like, thanks for the suggestion, and taking that and incorporating that to our food pantry. So just definitely asking like, hey, is there any feedback that we can receive from you? Just because I think our students have so much that we can learn from.
Earlier, I was thinking about this too, like when I've talked to folks who have worked with basic needs at Cal Poly for a long time, they often talk about the history of the food pantry and when it just started. And I think, and how it was like in this small like pantry cupboard and like it was very like guerrilla organized, like whatever they can get, put it in basically. And then when we first had the meal vouchers, it was because one individual donor had found out about student experiences from their son and then had decided to fund the meal voucher program. And so basically from there, if we think about like our trajectory of helping folks' basic needs on our campus, we've basically now been evaluating we're now in the process of evaluating it and actually getting back to the students and saying like, how was the experience for you? What recommendations do you have as like the key to improving these programs? And that was something I was thinking about for funding too, because we are seeing more funding from like the chancellor's office and other areas for this type of research, that like qualitative studies into the students too.
I'll just add just a little bit of that. One of the things we started just today at noon today, we started focus groups hearing from students on campus, what it is, that they see for basic needs, what are some things that are lacking, when things that, would be needed here. And I think some things that we've been considering are having ambassadors. We have different ambassadors across campus for different reasons. So bringing that back and promoting basic needs. One of the things that's interesting, and I think unique in some ways to Cal Poly's campus, are the donations that come in to fund things like our food pantry. If we look at other campuses across the CSU system, we see that there is such a large need because the donations don't come in the same way. And we're very, again, unique having so many donations from everything from parents, supporters, to athletics, to other fundraisings that just are happening all of the time. ASI is a huge one that we just received funding for. So for us, having the food available, and this sort of goes back to question one, we're not lacking food to be able to provide to our students. And that doesn't just include sort of non-perishable items, that includes perishable items as well. We have that. One of the things that we're realizing is people don't know that we exist. We have a campus of 20 some odd thousand students, and so many don't have a clue that we're even available. If they know, or that we're even here, if they know that we're here, they don't know where we're actually located. So that's been a huge miss on our part, is having something in abundance at times, having a product, and the product is food, having that available for students, yet students don't know where we're located or how to get in touch with us, or even know that we're still open during a pandemic. That's a problem. It's a problem for those who are greatly in need of food and other resources. So just wanted to add that on as something that is a huge eye opener, certainly for us. Or somebody just added into if Fiona did, they think that the resource is not meant for them. That is a huge piece. I'm not going to go today because it's okay if I miss a meal. That's the statement. It's okay if I miss one, but somebody else may need more. And it's like, no, there shouldn't be a missing a meal. We have food for everybody. And that's the thing about food insecurity. It's not just I'm starving and I don't know where my next meal is coming from. It's having to make that choice sometimes because I don't have enough income to maybe sustain 3 meals a day with snacks. So I'm going to forego some of the snacks, even though I need that to continue to thrive and to feel good. So.
I know 2 people raised their hands, and I think Fiona wanted to let Oscar go first, or Fiona wanted to go first, either way.
Yeah, I was going to just touch on really quick what Danielle said is definitely food insecurity has a stigma that I think not a lot of people want to talk about it or reach out for help because they may, a lot of students may think that help is kind of a sign for weakness, but it's actually a sign of strength that you're willing to let people help you and help serve you. And that's what we're here for. And I think with addressing food insecurity, there has to be a lot of validation that you're worthy of this food, you're worthy of receiving help, and we want to walk alongside of you in providing that need. Also, just how most people hear about our services is they usually hear from a faculty or a peer. It's hard because students don't really know how to seek across that resources until they talk about it among their peer groups. So it's definitely, I think that's definitely one way we can help it or just help students is by providing the resources that are available to them by just word of mouth. And we've noticed that that's been a huge help when students and when their student peers will talk about our resources at the food pantry and our basic needs.
I was just going to loop back to Danielle's point. We are a very unique campus. We are very affluent. And so there's a unique stigma. And as a predominantly white university too, there's a unique stigma that confounds for food insecure folks and just students who might be experiencing food insecurity for the first time. And so when we, in addressing these issues, are trying to do outreach to these students, we have to think about how can we empower folks on multiple levels as students and also in accessing their basic needs so that they can then turn and advocate for others in their community too.
Just to add on that point, I know freshman year I lived in Tenaya, which was like the EOP CP Scholars Building, and at that time there was like meal we had like polycard and meal swipes, but come second year we moved into a similar building, and there was kind of like this like there was just a mutual understanding that there was like this need for food or like this lack of access, that it was a stress. You could just when you talk to people, it was there. But one of the biggest barriers of like accessing that need is just like feeling like you just being like a POC on this campus, you already kind of feel off, you feel different, you feel kind of othered, and just also having that need for additional assistance and to food access is just compounds on that like feeling of othering, at least from my conversations with like folks then. And so that's just, I guess, another barrier of like that Fiona was talking about, is just providing the food, the support that they need and the empowerment that they need to kind of gain that access to those foods that they require.
I think one thing that I kind of like have been thinking about with a lot of these responses is also just there's kind of like this idea sometimes that people are trying to like take advantage of programs or like, like really like, but in reality, I think that people are like hesitant to even want to fully say how much help that they need. And so like ways to like reaffirm like, no, it's okay if you need more, like we have these resources available, and not just saying you can have like one of this, and one of this, but just kind of like giving people also the like the ownership to be able to assess their own needs and like handle that in whatever way they need, and like giving all of the opportunity for people to kind of self-narrate what their needs are and like how to help support those needs, versus just saying like every single person, this is exactly what they will need and this is like how much amount I'm trying to like give this person,
Yeah, thank you everyone. I'm glad to hear that like honestly the community is working together, and that's like what's thriving this work. So I'm happy to hear about that. And then also I wanted to mention like the food pantry like startup kind of reminds me of community fridges that are like so prominent here in LA. I'm from LA, and I don't know if there's any in SLO, but that's another thing that I want to put out there that I learned about this year, and kind of works the same way. People donate food to a fridge. Anyone who needs the food comes and gets it, however much they want, no questions asked. Yeah, just thought I'd throw that out there because that was something that I got reminded about. But to our next question, where can students from underrepresented communities like BIPOC or low income or even undocumented students access frequent hot meals and or groceries locally or on campus?
Yeah, well, I can mention a little about our services at the food pantry. It's completely free. All students do is swipe their polycard, no questions asked. We don't really have a limit on how much students can take. It's really an unlimited supply, and that includes fresh produce, non-perishable goods. And one of the things we noticed too is sometimes our students are always busy. They are really quick to they really prefer hot and ready meals, and that's something that we actually partner with a local vendor that provides a lot of these like quick and easy meals that have become very popularized, because as a college student it's really hard to find time to cook and to prep for making dinner. So a lot of students will opt into quick and ready meals, and that's something that we provided at our food pantry.
And I'll just add on another piece to that. Not only can students come in and access as much at a time, but there's also no limits on how often they can come in. So we don't put any caps on how much or how often, which is something just to allow sort of as often as is needed. One of the things I'll add to that also is just other access. Each month we partner with the Slow Food Bank Distribution. So we have that on campus available for staff, faculty, students, community members. And also Oscar sort of spearheaded working with Front Porch. And I know CalFresh is also a partner with that. So we're doing every month or so, we have prepackaged bags of groceries for students to come and take. Also, no question asked. They just need to either give ID, just sort of swipe it in as they would, or just give an email. So just to make the access easier, the collaboration with Front Porch is at their location. So if a student is currently off campus, or even if they're on campus, sometimes it's easier to get to different locations than it actually is to get to our food pantry, if I'm being honest. So we've tried to create different avenues for students to get access to food. The same items that they would get in the pantry, they could have access to other places.
And then for the organizations that I work with, through Pantry to Yena, that's the distribution that we do down in Santa Maria. It's every Sunday at 6 p.m. But if people are unable to make it down there and do need groceries, we do assemble them in SLO, and I'm sure there's a way that we can coordinate getting groceries to folks if that is a need. And then also through People's Garden Network, we're always trying to get fresh produce out to people. And so if there's a need for that, we can definitely coordinate that. And then also one of our main goals is to try and help people start their own gardens. So if people do want to start their own gardens to grow food, we have resources and can come and help, build a garden in someone's home. And we have all of a lot of resources supplies and everything that you need to build your own garden, seeds, plant starts, things like that, and education just on how to do that. If you don't have your own space to build your own garden, we also collaborate with Garden Club up at the Student Experimental Farm. So if people are having this need and this want to grow their own food, I'm sure that there's some way to create a space for that. But yeah, we can reach out on Instagram, Facebook, and also we have a website called gardennetwork.org. And then we're also trying to build a food bed at Emerson Park right now. We got a plot, and so that's going to be for our distribution, but maybe it's eventually going to morph into a space where people can kind of go and pick from that plot when they need it. Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to cut anyone off. Feel free to say, share anything if you need to. Sorry, we just got a comment in the chat. I'll read it right now. But these were all the questions we prepared. Thank you so much for sharing those resources. At the end of the event, we're gonna compile them all onto a flyer and share out via Instagram and the MCC and Dream Center newsletters. So hopefully for any students or staff that are still here, you can find them there. We did set up space for student questions. So if anyone that's on the call has any questions for panelists, this would be the best time to ask them. And if there's no questions for right now, Nat and I actually prepared some questions that we had ourselves as students. So I feel let me take advantage and get these answers. We were wondering, how exactly do you know if you qualify for CalFresh and how do you apply? If someone could speak on that.
start us off. So essentially, the CalFresh application process, there's some eligibility requirements that you have to meet. It's very individualized, so we prefer students to set up an appointment. If we are pretty booked, like you can email either me or Fiona, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. But it just covers basic questions, kind of covering income, household level, how many units you're taking, whether you're in a meal plan. And that's kind of like the basic eligibility, and there's kind of additional eligibility requirements if you are a student, which also there's a list it's pretty extensive, and different people apply to different things. Yeah, it varies per person, I guess, is the overall answer. I don't know if Fiona, you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, sorry, I was just putting the link to our website. So if you go on our website, we have a lot of graphics about what the process looks like. But basically, if a student were to make an appointment with us, we would pre-screen them to see if they would be eligible for CalFresh. And then if they are, we would take them through the application that goes directly to the Department of Social Services. And then throughout the process, so it could take about 30 days, anywhere from 3 to 30 days, we would text them reminders and basically along the way help them submit their documents and make sure that they can have everything that they need to get CalFresh benefits. Because we've heard from students and just from Maritza and I both experiencing the process, it can be daunting for students to go through with like all of the paperwork, and oftentimes it's the first time students have had to access a government resource like this. And so we're basically just there to help students access any resources. So if they're not eligible for CalFresh, then we basically help them see what they would be eligible for. And on campus, we have all of the other ones don't require eligibility in the same way.
Awesome. People, if you need CalFresh, go ahead and go to the CalFresh website. Another question that Sandra and I both had, as like students away from home, right? A lot of us are like feeding ourselves like by ourselves for the first time, or cooking for ourselves for the first time. I know that my cooking skills can definitely get better. So I was just wondering, what do you recommend for students who maybe are struggling and have this food, but they're like, what can I make with this? What meals, can sustain me, that are nutritious, and that basically I can feed myself with, but I, don't really know what to do. Those type of questions that come up with that.
Yeah, really quick. Liv was actually on this call, but she is funded through CalFresh Healthy Living, which basically, I'm going to look for the website and post it in the chat, but basically offers nutrition demos and healthy recipes and like how to read ingredient facts and navigate buying groceries, etc. To I think it's just the SLO community, but like focused on students. So I can get that link for you, y'all.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention is the SLO Food Bank has a great partnership with, the Cal Poly Food Pantry has a great partnership with the SLO Food Bank. And one of the things the SLO Food Bank started doing is they started doing like tutorial cooking. So definitely checking out local food bank websites and to see what ingredients they have, on what they give, and what tutorials they have on how to cook cost-effective meals. So that would definitely be a recommendation I would look into.
Well, thank you so much for answering that question. I do want to check in with anyone else that's on the call if you have any questions.
I don't have any questions, but I know of students in the past who have had trouble like traveling to these places to pick up food because they don't have a car, or they might think like the boxes are too heavy, or like a bike. So what advice would you give to those students who don't have the means to go and get like food?
There are different organizations throughout the county that certainly with COVID now are working to get things distributed. Here specifically at Cal Poly, one of the organizations that I mentioned before is Front Porch. Every Wednesday, they have pre-made dinners that they're not only delivering, but have available for students to come and pick up. I know various, religious organizations are also working to ensure that individuals who don't have transportation or access can sign up for delivery. And even Slow Food Bank on their website also, they have they're working with, again, different organizations to ensure that distribution can happen if somebody cannot get to a location. Now, that may be, only once a month, or it may be multiple times if somebody's, in need and, going to different distribution sites. But they can certainly work to, they have individuals, I'll say, who pick up for other individuals. So there's a network of individuals who work that way of, I can't get to the site, but this individual can and will provide the paperwork needed in order to get groceries. So there are a few options like that that will ensure that the food is getting to where it needs to go.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
There's also another program. I honestly don't know anything about the eligibility for it, but there's this organization called Harvestly in SLO, and they provide deliver groceries, specifically fruits and vegetable, and they have a new program called Harvestly Gives, and Harvestly Gives is providing free food to people who need it and delivering it. But I'm not sure how the eligibility works for it, but it might be something worth looking into.
I was just going to add too that the meal voucher program, when folks apply through Dean of Students, they can tell them about their situation and their lack of access to transportation and say, maybe I don't qualify for CalFresh and the food pantry and the food distribution are inaccessible to me because I don't have a kitchen or I don't have reliable transportation. And then they will take that into account when they review their application. And the meal voucher program offers basically money on your Cal Poly card that you could use on campus restaurants.
We did have one question in the chat, which Fiona seemed to answer, but I just wanted to ask it just in case you did want to elaborate on that. So the question was, will a meal plan make you ineligible for CalFresh?
Yeah, so generally when first year students live on campus and have the first year meal plan, they are generally ineligible for CalFresh because it usually exceeds 11 meals or the majority of meals per week. But in some cases, when folks have a very light meal plan, or maybe they're an RA or something like that, they can still be eligible for CalFresh. But that is something that we would help them go through in their appointment.
Okay, so I just wanted to open it once more to see if anyone else had questions. If not, we'll probably end a little bit earlier than we expected. So yeah, let me just wait maybe a minute and see if anyone else has questions. Okay.
Or any of our panelists want to add any last things too?
I do want to add just one thing is also with the Cal Poly Food Pantry, we also offer volunteer opportunities. So you can definitely volunteer a shift, and some of the roles include just checking students in, organizing the food pantry, taking inventory, and doing a one-time orientation and a one-on-one training with me. And the way to volunteer is you can definitely reach out to us at campus wellbeing at calpoly.edu, or reach out to me. I'll type in the email in the chat. But yeah, we definitely do offer those volunteer opportunities.
I'll just add too that So we hear back from students that they generally access resources when they're connected through peers and professors. And so one way that folks who might not be experiencing food insecurity themselves can help advocate for students is to advocate that their professors put on a syllabi text or advocate around them and educate themselves more on the local resources so that they can support their communities too.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm gonna stop recording right now.